Random Divide. Blitz and Stolas from the indie animated series Helluva Boss is a match made in hell. But can they stay that way? Today we are talking about the oddly controversial pairing of Stolas and Blitz from the TV show Has Been Hotel. And today I am joined with a very special guest, Man 1000 Thoughts. How you doing?
Hello,
Th-
everybody.
yeah. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, I've been a fan of your work for some time. So yeah, it was really cool of you to come on. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Nice.
Been enjoying doing these letterbox live streams, just
Mm,
talking movies with people. In some cases, roasting some people's
yeah.
opinions that they have on certain movies. Because
Hmm.
I've seen some that have definitely shocked me.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. What was the most recent kind of letterbox review you did? Like, what was the last thing that really stuck out?
it was this one just recently, but he like it. He had given something a 1 star, and I'm trying to remember exactly what movie it was, but it was just so baffling to me because it's just like it didn't deserve it.
Hmm.
It was like I know for a fact this is a Marvel movie. It was Spider-Man: Far From Home. He gave that a 1 star, and even I was just like, okay, you can have your contentions with the MCU, obviously, but
Hmm.
a one, I mean, no, a half a star. That's what it was. It wasn't even
Wow.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was a half a star. So I'm like, so you think this didn't even work on a structural level
Yeah.
like that? Because that's what that's saying at that point.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even the writing is bad, the acting was bad. You're saying, I'm like, come on, like
Yeah.
we're being a little extreme here.
Yeah, I have. I say I always feel bad whenever I talk about the MCU Spider-Man stuff because I like it overall. Like I think it's actually pretty good, but I do feel like whenever I talk about it, I just kind of like nitpick most of the time. It's like, well, I didn't like this or like this better in like this movie, but
Right.
but kind of a fitting thing of a very popular series that got a ton of praise at first, but then like after some time, like a lot of people had contention with it because today we are talking about the golden child of that when it comes to online spaces, Helluva Boss, specifically the couple of Stolas and Blitz. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Stolas and Blitz, in season one they were very like almost like side background thing that we would only get like hints into, and from my knowledge, I don't think there was as much vitriol when it came to discussing Souls and Blitz when it came to season one. But season two and onwards, it's like a minefield whenever you talk about these two as a couple.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Would you say even kind of knows that increase, or is it more of a? Were you like was there like something there before? Like was it always like this intense to talk about?
Yeah, it's weird because I've definitely been following Viv Z since the Has Been pilot drop,
Hmm.
and then they followed up with Hell of a Boss just shortly after,
Yeah.
and that was the show to keep up with since it's basically the one they were able to continue. But it there has always been this level of obsession that I've definitely seen happen with it, and
Mhm.
I kind of get it. It's like if you were around in the 2010s, if you were on Tumblr,
Yeah.
you're seeing that kind of become mainstream. You're seeing it be pushed out for for everyone now.
Mhm.
It's becoming popularized, and the people who grew up with it are now just happy to see that
Yeah.
finally realized, and so you can understand why people are a little protective of it.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's just like they get a little too protective of it. Some
Yeah.
people, because as someone who watched the original pilot, I liked it, but even I can admit there's some problems with the original pilot, like Has Been, and,
Okay. Yeah. Fast.
even in Hell of a Boss. It's been a minute since I last watched Hell of a Boss, but it's definitely like, okay, that wasn't them at their best, but as
Yeah.
we've seen as they've gone on, they've gotten better.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
it was like back then, it was really hard to talk about it because there was definitely people who were extreme on both ends. Either you either absolutely love Vivzie Pop and everything she makes, or you just have to hate her. And in many cases, that hate is just grifting.
A
Like,
bit,
people
yeah.
see there's a bag to be got from it, and people just took advantage of that. People like to make as much content as they could, and so they're stoking so much flames of vitriol to the point that now Vivzie becomes a sort of point of contention just talking about her. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like we should not be to a point where it's like, if you talk about the creator, somehow they're problematic even though they haven't done anything that problematic,
Yeah.
And then people lying on her name too.
Of course.
It's gross.
Yeah. It was a very kind of weird thing of me to notice, but also something kind of an issue I had of like, because a pilot exists in a very weird space of like, it's the testing grounds in a lot of respects, and some people were like kind of judging the whole. That I think my big issue became from like channels that like dedicate like 50% of their content to like criticizing like the show, but like before the show came out. And that was a very weird. This is a very interesting space now that the internet has kind of created, because of how indie shows work now, or how even like a web series can like potentially become a TV show. Usually you wouldn't see the pilot. Like an executive would see the pilot, or the pilot would be the first episode occasionally. But now it's like like I've never seen this much drama about a show before it came out.
If you're around with Steven Universe,
that's fair. Fitting enough, you talk about this because with the pilots, that's our first introduction to Blitz and Stolas' relationship, and kind of what I want to kind of knock out the first way first is, people talk about this couple a lot. They kind of bring up the pilot as like a good like point of like, as a point of like, oh, this is why this couple's like inherently toxic or something, because they they mentioned the scene of Stolas being a lot more villainous, a lot more like kind of grayish and like in the background, but the pilot kind of exists in a weird spot of being canon but also non-canon at the same time.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, especially, which is makes it even weirder, because Has-Been and Helluva Boss are supposed to be in the same. It's in the same hell, but those characters just don't know each other. But that makes it more tricky because Has-Been is on Amazon and Helluva Boss is an indie project.
Of course,
it's kind of one of those things where it like muddies the water for its world a lot of the time. But I don't know. It's always kind of one of those things where you do have to, as you watch as many shows as I've watched, it kind of gets you to realize, you kind of eventually realize, oh yeah, you really can't focus too heavy on like that those smaller details, because otherwise it really can wreck the story, and it kind of gets too much into a case of you're more worried about the world that the characters are in than you are the actual characters. Then that's something that you kind of have to look out for when it comes to this.
To get into it, Stolas and Blitz, I'd say by kind of take such a stage as probably both the main characters and probably the main couple the show is working to. And originally like a very, very, very praised couple and like kind of a series, but like immediately when season 2 happened, like I'd say maybe the first episode of season 2, I just saw like maybe like exactly half the fandom or half the people watching it just completely shift on it, like say like this isn't what it was meant to be, this is like bad, or like this is too like this is a problematic couple. And that's kind of what the aspects I want to talk about here, because you recently made a video of the most recent episode, Apology Tour, which some people were very kind of mixed on because it is like a very sympathetic episode towards Stolas, and is more critical of Blitz. And I want to kind of get into like some of the the points people bring up a lot when it comes to these characters. I think, well, first of all, their origin story is Stolas was part of this elite family in hell, the Goetia, which are basically demon royalty, and Blitz was a circus performer, and they met when they were like 10, 5, or something along those lines. And then, they have a wonderful day together, all this stuff. And, Blitz ends up stealing from Stolas' parents because that's what Blitz's dad told him to do. And then 10 years later, 15 years later, they meet one more 20 years later. They meet one more time. And this, we discover how they meet and how Blitz was originally going to Stolas' place to steal the magical book to get to Earth to do his job. And in the process, seduced and had sex with Stolas. And a lot of people kind of have issue with that, like kind of thinking it takes a lot of like responsibility off of Stolas' shoulders in a way. Is that kind of like what you've seen a lot, like a lot of the criticisms of that?
Yeah, it's a thing where I think people. It's odd because it's like the show makes it clear this is such a problematic couple. Like there's so many cases of showing that these two can't really work, at least not with the way they are right now.
Right?
Like because you think about the fact that Stolas was trapped in a marriage with a woman he didn't love and had to conceive a child again with a woman he didn't love.
Yeah,
and so it becomes a case of like, oh yeah, this is a damaged person and he's now getting in a very toxic deal with another damaged person. And at that point, it's like that can't work. That type of relationship couldn't work. It was super transactional where it's all a matter of we have this business deal and feelings aren't supposed to and we're not supposed to have feelings for each other, but it's like, how do you keep that going with the way they tried to hang out constantly or feel lonely at night? It's like, yeah, y'all can keep up the shtick of you're a bachelor forever. I mean, you could try to keep up that shtick as much as you want, but but it's like it's not gonna last forever. Especially with the way these two clearly want somebody to want them, and they look at each other for that. But it's like y'all ain't ready for that.
Yeah,
y'all both got to do some growing. And it's one of those things where I think people take more issue with Stolas on it because I don't know, it's kind of weird because Stolas is the one who's being the bigger person, breaking it off and actually saying, hey, okay, let's step back from this, let's figure ourselves out before anything, because it's not even like they have to stop seeing each other entirely. Stolas never said, I never want to see you ever again to Blitzø. So it's just a matter of they just like Stolas got out of a bad relationship and finally has to find himself. Blitzø is in that same boat because people tend to ignore this major aspect about Blitzø. Blitzø sucks.
Oh no, yeah.
He sucks. Like, he's so awful to his employees. He constantly harasses them. At that point, and not to mention his constant lust for violence, which I mean, yeah, it's hell. What can you do? But he's a little too into it as he should. I mean, he kind of shouldn't be, honestly. But it's just one of those things where it's like you just have to realize, yeah, even though he's in hell, because I said this in the video, it's like, even though you're in hell, that's just a setting. That doesn't mean everybody's a terrible person. Sometimes people just got sent here because of bad circumstances or something.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like people like, oh well, so the fandom's like they use it as either like a criticism or like a way to ignore other criticisms of the show. It's like, oh, it's hell, so why aren't more people like demons, or like why aren't more people like vicious, or like why should angels like not do it? It's like hell's just a cool setting in Visipop's world. It's just a way, like it's just like, because her thing's like demons are cool and I want to represent that more and stuff like that. So which is kind of something a lot of fans kind of try to give a deeper meaning to. That sounds a bit condescending, but it's like, I'm not saying like she didn't give it any thought. I'm sure she did, but it's like, it's one of those things of like, why is your series like star vampire? Like, why are all the queer characters vampires? Because I like vampires. Because it's interesting to put in. And yeah, Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about because I've watched a handful of anti-Stolas videos. I've watched a handful of videos in Stolas' favor. I've also watched videos in like are pretty neutral, and I kind of consider myself as much as I can be an expert in the Helluva Boss fandom. And something I do kind of notice that a lot of the fandom kind of ignores is that, and this is both a criticism of the couple, but also one of like Blitz, but a more complicated circumstance of Blitz is very sexually aggressive towards Moxie and Millie, mainly
Yes,
Moxie.
that's what I was saying. Like he constantly wants to cut into their relationship, and I'm like, that's not
Yeah.
okay.
They only have a handful of scenes in the first season. Blitz and Stolas. And Stolas does, kind of flirt to kind of like say stuff that's a bit like you can't take this like demeaning and stuff like that. But like then you have like Blitz kind of giving like almost like sexual threats to Moxie in the first episode of
Exactly.
Farmer. So yeah, that's totally like a notable flaw Blitz has, and he is a kind of a flawed, stunted person. But I think something that has kind of bothered me is that in the couple of Stolas and Blitz, I don't think Blitz has really been that like rude or really that mean to Stolas in season one. The closest he would get would be because if anything, he's just kind of like catty for the most part, nothing a bit too extreme. The closest he would get would be like the Aussies episode. That was like during a big emotional moment for Blitz. And but yeah, it's kind of like I kind of feel like I am glad the show acknowledges like Blitz's fault because Blitz is the main character of the show. It's like that's one of the things where you have like that kind of like character in this kind of saying like an anti-hero kind of thing of like it's always good to acknowledge this kind of like thing. But I don't like I feel like the show is kind of like transferring like well, yeah, Blitz is shitty, but it's like I don't think a lot of his shitty actions really come that much onto his relationship with Stolas, other than like maybe his emotional stuntness. What do you think about that? Do you think it's like the show's trying to transfer of like some of like Blitz's more flawed actions onto from his relationship with like Moxie and Millie or even like Veronica to like as a justification as like why Stolas is a bit more portrayed a bit more sympathetic here?
Potentially. I feel like it is trying to make it clear that it's like it's kind of a bit of comeuppance on on him because like when you come to Apology Tour, you see that house full of people who absolutely hate his guts, and it kind of is something where it makes him have to look back on himself and think about it. It's like, am I a good person at all if this many people just hate my guts? Like there was like especially when you see so many of them are still torn and hurt by this. And like they cry even though they're throwing darts at a Blitzø doll or cutting into a cake of him. They genuinely still hurt, and he never can realize he just is that stunted, and he just never could grasp the fact that it's like people do care about you. You have people who want to care about you. You just keep pushing them away before they can care that much about you, or you push them away when they do care too much about you. And it's just that defense mechanism. He just can't. He has to learn to disengage.
Right. Yeah. I think it's kind of a almost like a reasons to why he's so drawn to like Moxie and Millie and kind of wants to be like he almost wants the idea of like being in a polyamorous thing with them, but like probably he wouldn't like probably actually want that like actually the action. I think it's probably one of those things of like he likes the idea of being with like this perfect like super happy couple, but whenever he's like actually like because from what Veronica says, like whenever like she was like vulnerable around him, like he just ditched. This is becoming like almost like Roger from American Dad kind of levels of callousness.
Like Roger like would ditch immediately, and he wouldn't. But at least I will at least say Blitzø is at least better than Roger, because Roger
psychopath.
He would leave someone with a kid.
Yeah, I think it's also when it's a thing of like Blitz like being like, yeah, I cut out the relationship so no one really gets too serious or too hurt or whatever. But then he actually sees of like, no, you were really like how the way you left just kind of like really fumble things. It kind of like permanently hurt their feelings to the point where they're still not over it. So that's definitely a big a big moment for Blitz, like as of recently, of like uh, him having to be like, oh, I'm still affecting people now, because originally his apologies, quote unquote, were just very like here's like a transactional thing. Now I'm out. We're even now.
Yeah, it wasn't a real apology tour. All he did was just try to, like, he just gives a gift and say, "Yeah, I'm sorry." It's like, for what?
Yeah.
You know, like that's the thing. Like your parents try to teach you is like you don't just say I'm sorry. You have to explain what you did wrong. Like why are you sorry? You know, and he was thinking, oh, I could just speed run this and it'll get back at this person. And it's like, see, now you're showing that you're really not remorseful. Like you're apologizing to these people out of spite, and you're not even giving them the grace of actually meaning it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like you gotta reassess yourself in like what you've been doing this whole time, because you've just been screwing everybody over and you think it never can come back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah. I think it's kind of thing when it comes to fandom with like couple dramas or even just relationship drama in general is that people kind of want a side of like, well, who's 100% in the wrong? Like, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, or who made the best action, who's like the best boy. And while I do think like this episode is sympathetic, I don't agree. I do think this episode is very sympathetic to Stolas. I don't fully agree with the idea that the show's like Stolas is like with 100% a Whoopi or like 100% in the right. It shows him as like kind of being a flawed person, like more in his personal life with like his daughter and stuff like that. And you know, from what we can tell with that one trailer is that Via's going to have that big moment of like probably talking to Stolas about like how she feels because of like how much uh, she kind of views Stolas prioritizing spending time with Blitz over spending time with her.
Yeah, if anything, the show I think will very much tap into that because I think we're just at the start of Stolas fixing his problems, you know, because he does have to address the fact that it's like you did spend a lot of time with your booty call versus your own daughter. Like at the end of the day, you may not have wanted that relationship with Stella, but you had it, and now you got a daughter that you have to be there for, regardless of anything.
Yeah, I think me and my friend were talking about this, and like a very important point is that Stolas he was like delegated to be in an arranged marriage since he was like 10, and he was in an unhappy marriage for 20 years with a woman he wasn't attracted to, didn't love, and the only person he really liked was his daughter. And so his relationship with like Blitz, like his first crush from the very start, kind of ends up being like I don't want to say it to sound like demeaning, but like second adolescence, like teenage love to a degree. And that's very much how he acts in the first season around Blitz for the most time, of like a teenager who has his first like date or his first like big girlfriend or boyfriend. Like it's very like, oh, this is so cool, this is exciting. Like he's on that high. And it really isn't until Aussies where everything just comes crashing down and he sees the relationship for what it is.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta realize this ain't good.
Yeah.
It like Blitzø is not someone who wants to be boyfriend material. And it's like you want a boyfriend, Stolas. You want someone to care, and Blitzø needs to learn how to care first.
Yeah.
In fact, he needs to learn how to care for himself first.
And they don't really, the first real date they go on, like in quotations still, would be the Aussie date where Blitz gets him to come over, and to his credit, like Stolas isn't mad that like it was kind of a way to get like into the place, but it's the first time like they hung out in a non-work or sexual situation, and he's just like, "What'd you do to work?" And Blitz is like genuinely surprised that he like actually cares. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, oh sorry, really quick, I just want to give like a mention to this one YouTuber. I want to get his name right. Classic Man D. He makes a bunch of YouTube shorts, and like he'll give his thoughts and stuff like that. And he gave one about why people defend Stolas over Blitz, and yeah, I can't find it. But like basically, a summary was, uh, it's not that Stolas wasn't condescending or kind of like didn't talk to Blitz in a demeaning way at first, but that was like in the first 7 episodes before Ozzy's, and then Ozzy's is where he sees Moxie and Millie, and sees like an actual happy relationship, and
Yeah.
then he's like, we don't really have that, and that's when he tries to like from that moment on. And I actually didn't notice he doesn't refer to like Blitz as like his little impish plaything or anything like that anymore. He doesn't use like Blitzy or anything like that.
Mm.
And that was a very good point. I don't think a ton of people bring up of like, yeah, there's definitely a shift you can see in Stoles' attitude towards Blitz.
Yeah, he definitely. It's a case of he finally sees what a happy couple looks like, and it's like that's what I wanted, not with Stella, obviously. So, and he's like the quote. He's thinking the first thing to get that is Blitz, but he hasn't realized Blitz doesn't believe in relationships.
Yeah.
You know, he hasn't grown enough. But that's where we get to apology tour at this point, which it's honestly one of those things, and to the point about like the whole imp insult thing people bring up. It's funny to me people keep bringing that up because I'm like I don't think there's much contention in terms of like race relations or anything like
No,
that.
I think
So,
you can make an argument of like a class thing, but it's like when you're talking about a fantasy species like this, it's a bit, it's a bit different.
right. Like I don't think this type of show. I don't know. It even on a class level, I'm not sure how much the Goetias are that much against imps to be. I mean, yeah, they have imp butlers, I suppose, but I mean if they're actual butlers, I mean that's a job that just showed that's what they signed up for, and there's also the fact that. I mean, but some people do bring up that he's like mean to his butlers a bit, or just kind of carelessly waving them around as he's like talking on the phone. But I think that's just cartoonish gag
a bit,
that, versus it's supposed to mean too much. But I don't know. It depends on what the show wants to tap into on that. But I feel like they're not going to get into that.
Yeah, I will say I do think there's definitely because Hazbin Hotel, the universe thing, does have a whole like power and like class system. But the thing is, like, you can't pick up on this in the background of like, especially with how Blitz talks to and like other like succubi and like imps talk to like Stoles, like Your Majesty, stuff like that. But I don't think it's like a quiet case of like fetishization on like Stoles' part, especially with like what you mentioned with what the show is going for. But I will say, like, Stella definitely, she seems more mad that Stoles cheated on her with an imp than it feels like it would be one of those things of like, oh, you cheated on me, but you did it with another Goetia or something like that. I don't care that much.
I guess I didn't think too. I keep forgetting about Stella a lot.
A bit, yeah.
So it's, I don't, because it is like, oh, okay. I guess I was expecting her to just kind of go away at this point, but it's like, oh yeah, that's right. They probably would want to put more of a fallout into that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So it's likely we see her again.
I like that she's kind of like she's back as like semi-antagonist form, but it's one of those things of like, when people are like, oh, what about Stella Sympathizer? It's like, I don't really think this is the character you want to go for that, because she's almost like virtually a gag character at this point.
Yeah, basically.
Like
you just know her as someone who shouts and yells a lot.
Like what's her name? I'm trying to think. I can't think of the main girl from like Mean Girls. Oh, Regina George, or like the main Heather from Heathers. It's like, yeah, they're like, I feel like being additionally sympathetic from her kind of misses the point. And I do feel like if you do want like a female character that's like who actually got their like heart crushed and all this stuff and got betrayed. I think Veronica is kind of a bad representation of that, especially with the new episode, Apology Tour.
Mm.
Yeah, you can make the argument like I have seen some people bring up like just because like she's mean or prickly doesn't mean she's a bad mother or a bad wife or whatever, deserve to be cheated on. It's like that's not untrue, but it's like in a fictional medium, especially in like an indie show like this that only has so many episodes, clues have to be laid down. And so the fact that she's like hoarding the blanket and like throwing imps in all her like and screaming in all her screen time, really like that says way more than one like painting in the background that she's probably
Yeah.
posing for.
Yeah, that's what's kind of weird to me is that people can think she's just she's just the simple wife that got cheated on. It's like the show has told you this is not a legit relationship. They are forced together, and Stolas obviously ain't happy with that.
Yeah.
So to think they're just happy from the get-go is odd to me. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, if in terms of the real world, when it comes to this type of marriages, you would just, divorce first before doing anything like that. And Stolas just should have done that.
Yeah.
But these are messy people who have not really learned a proper sense of virtue. They've been raised in high class society, which has some very gross rules. So they're
have you
starting
seen
to
Downton
learn
Abbey or Succession?
I hear Succession is really good.
I love it. It's one of my a shockingly funny show, which I'm very glad I knew very little about it. Pendacat says I still find it insane how it's been 2+ years plus 16+ episodes that we haven't seen Stella and Octavia. Like what the hell? Interact with each other. That's what he meant. I don't disagree with that, but when it comes to kind of criticisms like that, I have to put on my kind of corporate animation brain of like, well, this is an indie anime show. It took them over like a year to just get like 8 episodes out. They have like another 8 in season 2, and like there's stuff they want to prioritize. And at the end of the day, like Stella's probably like this one of the lesser characters they care too much about. Via's probably up there, but it's like they want to focus Moxie and Millie. They want to focus on Blitz. They want to focus on Stolas, of course. I will say the show does have a shockingly large amount of characters that they set up in season 1, but
yeah, that's the biggest problem is that that's my thing, to ask for more interactions of side characters, because that's the biggest thing we need to remember is these are the side characters. They're not who are important to anything. They're the side characters to a side character. That's the other thing. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, this is Stolas's ex-wife and daughter. I'm like, okay, it gets into a weird thing of you're focusing too much on the world of Helluva Boss rather than the main characters that we should be focusing on. That's my biggest contention I've had with Helluva Boss is we keep focusing on all these other characters. It's like, okay, can we get some more like Luna? Can we get some more Millie? Can we get some more Moxie? Can we get some more Blitzø? Can we get more of them actually doing their jobs? Actually going to Earth and assassinating people or bumbling those up.
Season 2 definitely, like that was when I would say that's when Stolas kind of becomes like a pseudo main character, maybe a secondary main character, if I'm going to be honest. Because he was pretty much definitely a side character. He only has like I think like 8 interactions with the cast in season 1. But it at the same point, kind of like how Hazbin Hotel and the Hotel and the Setting of Hell, the imp business is kind of like a jumping off point, as are like a lot of shows. I think that's also another. Sorry, just the smallest tangent. It's kind of a criticism of like Hazbin Hotel. It's like, well, yeah, like the show needed more episodes, but like I don't think Visipop came in like kicking down the doors. Like I only want 8 episodes. That's all I want.
Oh yeah, no, it's very much a case of like there's a limit to how much you can get done, especially on small budgets nowadays.
Of course,
like, So yeah, you got to prioritize in some places, but it does suck in some case for Helluva Boss in that it's like there's so many ideas that just sadly got pushed out that now it's like, okay, we kind of do got to put a little focus on that just to explain it, and it's like there's so much to have to deal with or to have to remember now.
Yeah, I think there's also another thing of like Stolz's faults are a lot more passive than Blitz's, and they're more like kind of obliviousness over like
Mm.
maliciousness.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
oh, he didn't know, or all this stuff. And some people do have issue. I did have issue with this a bit at first, of like, because I kind of expected Souls to be a more kind of morally gray character at first with season one, but then when season two we get the backstory and all that stuff, it's like, is it just like me and some of the fandom also kind of we put our eggs in a different basket than what they were really going for? It's like I can't really be like, it's not really fair if I'd be like, oh, I want this to be like how I thought of it, of like to be morally gray. It's like my vision. It's like it's not like that would be a bad thing for them to explore, but it's also like, it is their series, and it's like I do kind of like doubt the fan theory some of them have, of like some people have, of like, oh, season two, the first two episodes were like a response to season one, or like response to some of like the fan backlash, or like fan like praise of Stoles. Of like, I really doubt that with how quick season two came out, all things considered, because this was probably being made when season one was like actually wrapping up.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was also some stuff when it comes to like the voice actors for Luna, that even a reason, like there was a reason why Luna was silent for a lot of episodes, just because the voice actors was out. So even certain episodes aired a bit weirdly. Like I think the last episode of season one ended up premiering after I think the first episode of season two, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and that was a whole legal thing with Kesha.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't the first time I experienced that. Like, I was there during the Stephen Bomb era of like how weird some schedules can be. But yeah, it's a thing of like phantom perception of like, well, I inherently wanted this, so this is kind of what like I went with a Ron mindset.
Yeah,
agree?
I think Stolas, it is kind of one of those things where, I don't know, Stolas was very much low on my radar when it came to watching the show. So, because to me, I was like, okay, that's the booty call that Blitzø has set up, so they have money to do stuff. Cool. Like, that was probably like it, because I think people went in, because I think most of us going into the show thought it was going to be like a workplace type of series, like say The Office, but in hell, or in a little bit of a sense. But it ends up being a case of, no, it's this strong character drama it's this character drama with all these messy characters who have all these different people they've screwed over in some sense, and it all culminates against them. And it's like, okay, it's still interesting to watch and stuff, but it's a little removed from what I thought this was going to be.
Yeah, I don't think that's. Yeah, I think I might be kind of in a weird sense of like, I do actually, I like a lot of the character drama in this, and I don't terribly mind it not focusing as much as like on the assassination plot, because I do feel like with the premise of Helluva Boss, it's not just imps in hell who are also assassins. It's imps in hell who have this weird arrangement with this weird guy, and they also travel to Earth and they have to deal with that other kind of stuff. So it's a pretty flexible series, kind of like what I was going into. But yeah, that's another thing. I will say, if like, I do think if it's like you want more like linear, just straight, like almost like completely episodic, one by one, with like small story pieces in it, with like an Office piece, I do understand kind of like being thrown for a loop, because even like episode 2 of Helluva Boss, even though it's still like they're technically doing their job, they're in hell, and they're they're bodyguarding Stolas, and it's more about Stolas and his relationship with Octavia.
Yeah, I think that's one thing to see it as. It's like it is supposed to be. It does lend itself to just being this messy show about. Show about these very messy characters at the end of the day, and seeing how they actually grow from these messy situations that they themselves got themselves in, or they got themselves in some of those cases, but not all.
Yeah. I will say, well, like some people are like, oh, Blitz didn't even like Stolas or had anything fun with them. It's like in season one, like we do see Blitz flirt with Stolas a handful of times, and like it's not something he's the moments we meet them, like either like after them having sex or like even before, like in the Dorks episode, uh, Blitz is like, yeah, it's like it's kind of a fun thing, but it's like I'm keeping it like transactional and casual, like as professional as this can be, but uh yeah, after but the one thing that did kind of get me was in Full Moon when Stolas kind of grabbed the book back. It's like, well, I have to uh I need this back permanently, and Blitz gets like really scared of like the point where he's like close to crying of like, please, I need this book. It's like that's it, there's kind of like a power dynamic to a degree, but it's not like one Stolas is like leveraging over Blitz. I'd say.
Yeah, they were kind of good in making sure it never felt like Stolas was gonna lord over Blitzo. Like it even because even in Apology Tour, it's like even though we know Stolas can be powerful, he doesn't use that against Blitzo.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to smush him or kill him or anything.
Yeah.
He just cries and runs away from him.
Yeah, I will say, I think a fault in Stolas, not so much the writing or anything, but like an actual character flaw he has is that he has a very grandiose romantic view of romance. Of like romance is fan of like big moments because when we see him casually, he's like reading a book. It was called like Imp something, like Imp Romance or whatever. I'm guessing that's like the 50 Shades in this universe, and he's watching like telenovelas, and all those like moments of trying to connect with like Blitz outside of the episode of Ozzy's, mainly in Full Moon, is like the whole Asmodean crystal thing, and like which is like a semi proposal, but it's yeah, it's one of those things like I wonder if is this like a flaw in the character or a flaw in the show when Blitz kind of like regresses back a bit and then Stolas just is like shuts down the conversation of like I've wanted you for so long, but now I know it's like is this like again, we're only halfway through the season, so it's like, is this like the show signed with Stolas, or is this like we're getting a view of Stolas and like kind of how he has a very stunted view of relationships because he's the only relationship he's had is like Stella.
That is an interesting takeaway from it. I never thought about it because you do have to think about the fact that Stolas never really was shown proper love before. So it is possible that moment where he does tell Blitzo, I want this, there the show could be hinting that it's like he's saying, you're saying you want that, but you're not realizing that's not exactly real.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to look like what you think it looks like. You know, it's not going to look like what you've read in books or what you've seen in a movie or TV show. Yeah. It's going to be work.
He doesn't have
the relationship with work.
He doesn't have the small moments of love like the way Moxie and Millie or Asmodeus and Fizzy do, stuff like that. Yeah, I will say though, this does kind of remind me of like, this is going to be such a nerd reference, but like Nostalgia Critics reference, like when he was talking about Shark Boy and Lava Girl, of when he was doing a bit of like, because the kid reads the Shark Boy of like, your dad is at the bottom of the ocean in a submarine looking for you. It's like dick delivery. Like, like, don't start with I need the book back permanently. Be like, oh, I have something for you.
Basically, like he immediately had to just like rip his heart out there. Yeah. It's like, don't say it that way first.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also, there's a thing of like Blitz saying like let's go, which I know a lot of fans have been saying like let's talk, like let's have it out right now, but it's like Blitz is at like an 11 out of 10 right now, and it's like it almost feels like we're not going to talk. It's almost like we're going to yell back and forth, like we're going to fight and I'm going to win.
Yeah,
is kind of how I kind of view that moment, but I do think it's like it's not invalid to like view it as like Blitz being like Soul's just kind of like, again, he pushed Blitz out basically with his magic. And it's like goodbye because it didn't go the way he thought.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like they weren't at a spot of being able to like properly talk it out right now. Like Blitzo literally was just cursing and being angry and just constantly berating Stolas. Even it's like, yeah, no, what if they try to talk that out? It's just going to end up with them as enemies.
Yeah,
they're going to hate each other. So it's like they need to like take a time out from each other and cool off and actually assess some things properly, like before they just go blabbing off and saying something that's like you said you put that out there, you can't put that back. Because
that's definitely a thing with couples or even just friendships in general. If, like, I just need a moment just to chill out before we talk.
Like, or actually make sure you got your thoughts together.
Yeah,
otherwise it's like you will lose the friendship entirely. And you got to ask yourself, do you want to lose the friendship? Are you ready to lose the friendship, or in this case, are you ready to fully lose that relationship?
How committed are you to just winning the argument?
It's like you can either win or you can be happy. You can't be both. You can't have both.
Yeah, I think that is also another thing of like Blitz and Stolas, like they've only had so many moments of hanging out because of like how of course how little episodes there are. That's not like a criticism against the show. That's just the reality of it. But they haven't had like the first real fight. They haven't had like first real like small moments and stuff like that, or like maybe like the Aussies. I think maybe the closest they get to like a fight was when the end of Aussies where Blitz says like, let's pretend this relationship isn't anything more than you wanting to fuck me. And that is such a big moment that's like it's such a big like holy shit moment that like even I kind of like stuck with that like for so long. It's like, why aren't they talking about Aussies? If anything, that's kind of like a weird praise of the show of like, well, that dramatic moment was so good and I want more of that with
Yeah, I think the show does well on those type of like strong moments. I definitely like the one with Millie and Moxie at the camp where it's like Moxie had to come to terms with like, yeah, your wife people are more interested in while you're kind of just being odd.
Yeah. very, very attention seeking and like you don't want to be like overly codependent. But yeah, it's the thing of like because now we're starting to like really see Stolas like on his own. Like no one's in his house. He's not with like Blitz. I do think this is something that does bother me a little, or like something I want to see more of. I think if they want this relationship to work, Stolas has to have kind of a life and relationships outside of Blitz. So I hope something kind of sticks with like kind of Araska's crew to a degree, because it kind of feels like, and it might just be me reading into like the text of the show or like the undertext of like it feels kind of like the show being like once Stolas gets with Blitz, he'll just be permanently happy or something like that. Like that's his end game. It's like, well, he should also have like a community on his own.
Yeah, like that's the biggest thing. It's like if Stolas is supposed to grow, he needs to actually grow and commit to that by being with other people. I mean, I wouldn't be upset if they did something like where Stolas hangs with Millie and Moxie to get a grasp of what a good relationship is, but he still doesn't try to hang around them while they're with Blitzø, And I think and I do agree. It's like we should see. I mean, Stolas should like be in a different relationship just to be able to understand what real love can look like, in that actually have that experience before. And honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to them keeping them broken up if they decide to go that route. If they just say, yeah, this was a toxic relationship from the beginning. Its foundation was really bad, even though these two took time away and grew. Their happiness still wasn't with each other, Yeah,
definitely. I have seen some kind of like older review stuff about like, of course this might have changed because this was like right after the pilot, and like I think the most episode we've got was like episode 1 of like they're talking about like Stolas and Blitz are like Endgame, But of course, that may have changed at this point because not everything's going to be permanently set in stone. But it is kind of a frustrating thing between these two, and it does the relationship does kind of remind me a bit of. Have you ever seen Frasier?
I've heard of it, but never watched an episode.
Yeah, well, yeah, very briefly. There's Niles and Daphne. They don't get together till like season 7, and Niles is Frasier's brother, and he's kind of like upper class, and she's like she's his father's physical therapist, and like the whole show he's like pining after her a bit. But when they finally get together, Daphne has that moment of saying like, well, if you think about it, we kind of have an advantage over other couples because we've spent so much time together that we know a lot of our eccentricities and like our quirks and like our small stuff, and like they're friends first. And Niall, like, it does feel like if Niles and Daphne didn't end up together, it would be like that's the end of them. Like, I don't think Niles would be like, because Niles has moments of like, oh, Daphne wants to be with someone else. I'll support her in that. Yeah, it's the thing of like, I think this might be like the first other kind of like interaction we've seen Stolas have with people who aren't like Goetia, like an actual interaction instead of like people trying to like kill him or stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like his first time just being down with the commoners. He's been to other places, but like really being down
not
with
doing
them
his job.
Yeah, not doing his job, like off the clock and just chilling and hanging with them. And there's no like contention. There's no. Oh yeah, no, you're not welcome here, rich boy, or anything like that.
Yeah,
he's just there.
Yeah. I will say, like, speaking of the rich stuff, I don't think it's like as much of a class thing, but I do think the show kind of portrays him a bit Disney princess-esque in a way.
A little bit, yeah.
And that can be a frustration for some people. I know some people want a more darker, more like critical take on this kind of character, but it's one of those things of like, I see what the show is really going for and what it's like, because they were both like kind of were they meant to hurt each other or not? Probably not, but they were both like taking advantage of the other one, for their own personal benefit. Stolas was doing it to live out some like kind of like fantasy romance he had in his head, while Blitz was doing it for like financial gain. So it's like they're both like kind of like they both kind of put themselves down this road, if anything.
Yeah, it really can come down to that. Like this is just a strange set of circumstances that a lot of it is some of it's their own choices and some of it life screwed them over, and it's like, this is what led you down there.
Yeah. I would like to see Stolas have a bit more personal control of his own unhappiness, because right now, and that's kind of a theme of the character of like, now he's really like coming to his own, like this is like the first like real choices he's starting to make for himself. But I would kind of like to see like some of his faults or something be like kind of like portrays more, oh, this is what you did, but you can improve yourself and stuff like that. Because now it was like, because a lot of Blitz's faults are rightfully like on him, and I think that's very respectable of the show to kind of point out. But Stolas seems like the show's trying to portray him a bit of like a victim of like circumstance.
I think there's definitely some places where they can play around with him having to come to grips with some shit he's done that's hurt people, like the biggest thing being his daughter. He still really needs to answer on that front a bit more, but it is the case of like, well, we really do gotta wait and see. But I think for the most part, it is the show wants it to be clear that it's like this person, that Stolas is not too far gone as Blitzø is. Like Blitzø needed the wake up call the most to have to to actually grow. Where Stolas just realized, oh, I have no proper frame of reference of a good relationship, and the one I'm in right now is not a good one.
Yeah. It is kind of funny seeing like Stolas see like how not over Veronica is and be a bit weirded out. It's like, okay, that's good. That's a good like kind of like implication that Souls would never go like be like this better at Blitz or anything. If anything, just like kind of like catty like X stuff at first. And we've all been in a relationship that like has ended. It's like you're a bit like irrationally mad, like emotionally mad, but yeah, yeah. I also when it comes to Blitz, I don't want to like this isn't me like psychoanalyzing Dizzy Pop. Like I'm far from doing that, but
Right.
I am because she has mentioned like she is such a fan of shows like BoJack Horseman. I do wonder if that was kind of like a unintentional inspiration of like because BoJack Horseman, the later seasons especially, and this is a full like cooking with gas 10 out of 10 like praise I have for the show. Like it's very critical of BoJack and his faults, and they want to put him in like the foreground. Like it's like yes, you have sympathy for BoJack, but it's like BoJack is still like he's like an adult man who's still in control of his own life, and like some people aren't going to forgive him, and like he needs to acknowledge that the shit he did was like really shitty. I do kind of like because even now, even though Solus is like a secondary main character, Blitz is still the main character. He's still the guy.
Right.
But it's a framing kind of thing. But it's just it's one of those couples of like one may not be entirely in the wrong, and I mean they both like have their own flaws, and it's trying to portray like a complicated situation, but like some fandoms just don't like nuance.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people want to have a clear good guy and bad guy when it comes to any situation in fiction, and it's just like there's always some sense of nuance we have to recognize when it comes to these stories. Sometimes you're not gonna see a relationship between a hero and a villain. Sometimes it's a case of both of these two are both the villain.
Yeah,
And we're seeing why that relationship can't work. Because it's indicative of plenty of actual toxic relationships where it's not built on a good foundation between the two.
Yeah, especially because like the latest episode, Apology Tour, is the one we see the most on equal playing foot, I'd say. Of like Blitz has like no obligation to Stolas, and Stolas doesn't feel like he's not enraptured by Blitz as he was in the past. So it's like you see them more kind of during their normal circumstances, just talking. Like Blitz, like that is the gayest shit I've ever heard. Someone's really good at like animating teeth in the show.
Like, yeah, they are. I mean, if it's a story, I mean, it's a series with demons. If they weren't good at teeth, that'd be crazy.
Oh yeah, but also like stuff like that one demon like brushes his hair kind of sideways. Like that was really good. I noticed that. Like, yeah, like really impressive crew. So as we wrap up, are there any like thoughts or like hopes you want this couple to go down, or as well as the series in general? And do you want to see them get together?
I think the biggest hope I want to see is for Blitz to actually grow the most from this and actually realize, I also got to become not just a better person, but an actual hell of a boss. Like he actually does become the hell of a boss that Moxie, Millie, and Luna can say, yeah, that's our boss.
Yeah. Fizzy Pop, make that the last line of your show. If that's not the last line, I'm burning the studio down.
We need that one.
Yeah.
Like need that callback immediately. But it's like I did in Apology Tour, I did like where Veronica was like, she was such a visceral ex who absolutely hated his guts, but she was like, like she finally gets some level of an answer to the question of why are you like this. She finally sees it. It's like, oh, okay, you just don't understand that people did care for you. Like you kept thinking everyone just was leaving you, but no, you wanted to leave them before it got real. You kept running away, and so it gave her some some validity, because it's like you get to finally chew this motherfucker out properly. You actually make it clear, this is why we didn't work, because of you. It really is you. It's not it's me thing. It's you.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely it portrays like a lot of Rosca's like former actions as like very much more justified. And in the past comments were like very comedic, but now it's like, oh no, what you did was like actually shitty.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of at the same boat. I would like to see, of course, I do think we are going to get more Team Imp kind of stuff with like just from up the trailers we've seen alone, and I do hope like it's a bit we see a bit more Stolas on his own. We see a bit more Stolas like taking up to his actions like a lot more. I'm not saying he hasn't at all, but like him kind of being put through the ringer and in a different way than Blitz. But yeah, it's overall, I think it's a couple that can work, and I still find this a very interesting part of Helluva Boss. And it's one of those things of like you just gotta see, you just gotta wait and see.
Yeah, basically, it really does become a case of like we can definitely have some contentions with what we've seen so far, but at the end of the day, we don't fully know what the end goal is going to be. So we that's where it's like, the anticipation, the excitement, it gets to us.
Yeah, I can't believe My Adventures with Superman approves of Lois jumping off a building and blackmailing her. I can't believe that. Just fucking wait until the next episode. Jesus Christ!
It's like so many people.
Just calm down.
Chill out. They're gonna address it, and also that's Lois. If you know Lois Lane, she does what she needs to get the scoop.
Yeah, it's just like just wait a minute, just calm. I do wonder if that's kind of like the streaming mindset of like now people have to wait week for a show. They're like, I want it now. I want it right now.
Funnily enough, I think with the advent of in the post X-Men 97 world, I think stuff like My Adventures with Superman started getting people ready for it, to understand it's like, okay, you're gonna wait. Yeah. We gotta get y'all back to where we were with Cable. You wait in anticipation for the next episode now.
Yeah, TV shows are back.
Yeah, at this point, people are excited. They're like, "What? That's where it stops. Come on, I want to see what's happening next." But it's like, you gotta wait.
Yeah, I bet.
The excitement's back now. Now you go out. Now you go talk to people about what you just saw and how much you're excited.
Yeah,
you keep it in the zeitgeist. You keep it in the air for people to actually grasp. I mean, to jump into this now because they're hearing more word of mouth of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, it's about it for us. Man, with thousand thoughts, why don't you tell us what you do, any plans you got, and where they could follow you?
Y'all already know it's Man of 1,000 Thoughts. I analyze cartoons and cartoon accessories. I make video essays just talking about animation and all the best ways and how it affects many people's emotions and how we learn to understand the deeper messages and subtext that the shows we either watched back in the day or watched even today have.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on. As always, I am your host, Greyworks, creator of Mr. Manhattan and Howling Hoods, and the next episode of Howling Hoods should hopefully be out by this summer. Made by animators from Has-Been Hotel, from Phineas and Ferb, from Hit Monkey as well. And yeah, so stay on the lookout for that. Stay safe, people.